For decades, it's been a cornerstone policy affecting the livelihood of farmers around the EU, today providing food security to 500 million Europeans. Reform of the Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP, approved by Parliament and due to come into force in 2015, continues the decoupling of assistance to farmers from their production, the so-called first pillar, linking payments instead to market conditions and yields, as well as mandatory greening measures. The reforms are also about strengthening rural development, its second pillar, through agri-environmental measures and assistance to modernize aging or outdated agricultural equipment. The CAP reforms recognize the vitality and diversity of European farming on fields like this one here in Belgium, not only in terms of feeding people, but also literally preserving the landscape itself. The reforms reward sustainable practices which preserve biodiversity and the ecology of rural areas, which account for 77% of total European landmass. For Europe's estimated 14 million farmers, the CAP aims to ensure a fair standard of living and affordable food prices for consumers. Around 57 billion euros, or 43% of the total EU budget, is currently spent on the CAP. 30 years ago, it represented nearly three-quarters of the total budget, clear evidence that it is not as all-consuming as it once was. However, what EPP Group lawmakers have successfully managed is continued direct income and market support for farmers in exchange for implementing greater environmental measures. EPP Group spokesperson on environmental issues, Elisabeth Köstinger, called the vote a big victory for rural development and the group's efforts in Parliament.
We are very much in favor of the greening which is proposed from Commission, but we also say that countries and farmers which already have done a lot for agricultural, environmental, climate measures should not be punished. The Rural Development Fund is for the whole rural areas, so a lot of communities and projects where the agricultural sector is linked are also very much supported by the Fund of Rural Development.
Meanwhile, the EPP Group's Merid McGuinness says the reform result is that farmers and consumers continue to be the beneficiaries of the world's highest quality produce.
They want a territorial balance to the landscape. They want to make sure that farming isn't concentrated into one region. And we're doing that through this agriculture policy. And we're also saying to citizens, we spend a lot of money on agriculture because we value at our very core in the European Union what farming and food production means to our citizens and to our farmers.
Another key issue is fair distribution of farming support. The CAP budget redistribution between newer and older member states means no farmer will receive less than 75% of the community average by 2019. Reducing the impact of volatility on input prices is another issue. Energy and fertilizer prices have increased dramatically in recent years, and funding will continue to go to softening that blow for farmers. It represents progress and sustainability for farmers, says Pekka Pesonen, Secretary General of the Farmers and Cooperatives Association, Kopa Kojeka.
The outcome actually confirms the importance of the CAP. We hand more or less maintenance of the Common Agricultural Policy financial framework. Of course, it's not a perfect solution for us from farming community, but at the end it was recognition of the importance of the CAP for the whole of Europe and not only for agriculture.
Direct financial support for farmers has become ever more crucial with the recent economic crises. In some cases, up to 60% of income is derived from the CAP. But reforms are intended to make 30% of overall income dependent on compliance with efficient agricultural practices related to sustainability, preservation of grasslands, and crop diversity. EPP Group member Albert Dess says the reforms will achieve that.
Ich bin überzeugt, dass mit den Beschlüssen, die jetzt gefasst worden sind, sowohl die europäische Landwirtschaft leben kann, wie auch die Interessen von mehr Nachhaltigkeit berücksichtigt wurden. Wenn ich nur daran erinnere, dass jetzt verpflichtend auch in der zweiten Säule 30% für Agrarumweltmaßnahmen verwendet werden müssen, dann ist das eine wesentliche Verbesserung. Auf der anderen Seite ist aber auch für die Landwirte eine stabile erste Säule erhalten geblieben, damit sie auch Planungssicherheit für die Zukunft haben.
The reforms are also about better supporting so-called active farmers, that is, farmers who really work the land and not those who simply use the land for air or rail transport, sports facilities, and the like. Now, an influx of younger people as active farmers in that case would be not only welcome, but necessary. Farming is labor and capital intensive, and the economic climate does not make it easy for younger farmers under the age of 35, who represent only an estimated 6% of all farmers. In addition, there are still discrepancies between farmers in the east and west of Europe. Redistribution and incentives for younger farmers is key, says Pessonen.
We would like to see this emphasis for young farmers put into the investment plans, that those young farmers that are interested in getting into the sector, they would be given a boost to put up their business, and for the next 25, 30 years that is required. This is really important for us. Then, of course, we support the Commission initiative when it comes to redistribution support to a certain extent amongst member states. We see a, let's say, long-term trend where we need to have more uniform set of policies put in place. But then this takes a long time. It takes years. It's not going to be overnight.
And while the EU's farmers continue to receive large amounts of the public budget, defenders say the CAP acts as a backstop to prevent supply security and food safety from slipping to levels the average EU citizen simply won't accept. Meanwhile, the EPP Group has supported farmers' efforts to organize themselves into producer organizations, groups which would be in a stronger negotiating position vis-à-vis the food distribution sector. Voters in next year's European elections should feel reassured, says the EPP Group's Merid McGuinness.
So there are two key messages to two core sets of voters here. First of all, to the farming community, that the Common Agriculture Policy survives, reformed, an environmental focus and linking payments to land. The second message is to the wider citizens who actually want to have food produced in Europe.
Just as importantly, European Union's elected officials now for the first time have the power to guide and vote together with the European Council on measures which help safeguard the sustainability requirements for both farmers and consumers. Agricultural reform has always been complex, and its sheer financial size means there will be winners and losers. But in a world of fast-shifting fortunes, lawmakers don't want to gamble on holding hostage Europe's food supply chain in the millions of very real people, farmers and consumers, who depend on it. Find out more about the activities of Parliament's largest political force by going to eppgroup.eu. Thanks for looking in, and see you again soon.